Today's video. As you can tell by the title, we have Bible characters ranked from best to worst. And the way I'm going to rank this video is by absolute best, which is like what it sounds like, someone that did very, very little wrong. And their legacy is pretty much a story of goodness. Next, we have good example, which is pretty close, but people in this category did some pretty bad things. And the bad things they did don't outweigh the good, but it's still noticeable. Like, it was bad enough to where people actually wrote about it. Next, we have normal. These are people that did things that weren't necessarily perfect, but they were things to be expected of a normal individual, right? Just very, very normal behavior. Next, we have bad example. This is sort of the opposite of good example. These are people whose actions outweigh the good, meaning that the bad things that they did outweigh the good. And then lastly, we have get thee behind me, Satan. These are really, really bad people. The Bible doesn't really talk about the good things that they did. It's almost as if it's implied that they did no good. They were just that bad. So starting things off, we have John the Baptist. This is going straight into the absolute saint category. As we know, he prepared the way for Jesus Christ, and he was also martyred. And he actually, low-key, may have been the first martyr. I might be wrong, though, in terms of like after Jesus was born. But yeah, absolute saint. Next, we have Stephen. This is also another absolute saint. He was also martyred. He was stoned to death. And as he was dying, he literally saw heaven. Like, he literally saw heaven as he was dying. Pretty poetic, actually. But yeah, absolute saint. Next, we have Moses. This is going to go into the good example category. And the only reason I say that is that, again, he did some bad things, right? He killed the Egyptian after he saw what the Egyptian was doing to the Hebrew. And he also struck the rock out of frustration when God had actually told him to speak to the rock. And as a result of his frustration and ultimately his disobedience, he never got to step foot into the promised land. And so, again, it's not as if Moses is only remembered for those two things. He's actually remembered for, again, the 10 Commandments, crossing the Red Sea, leading the children of Israel out of Egypt. But he did some bad things that sort of marred his reputation from being perfect. But again, a very, very good example. Next, we have Samson. Also another embodiment of good example, because realistically, guys, like, Samson's main flaw was that he fell into lust, right? Like, he fell into lust. Like, he was seduced. He fell for a Philistine or a Canaanite, I think it was, who actually betrayed him. And so he was a good example of strength and of like commitment before he met Delilah, because he was a Nazarite, and up until that point, or actually I think throughout his entire life, he never drank wine. And until Delilah betrayed him, he had never cut his hair. So he was very committed. He was very strong. But again, the woman, the Canaanite woman, was his downfall. But again, overall, a good example. Next, we have Abel. This is going into absolute saint. Literally was killed by his brother for simply being good. It doesn't really get any more simpler than that. Absolute saint. Next, we have Barnabas. If you don't know, Barnabas was a friend of Paul, and essentially Paul wanted to visit the churches, I want to say in Asia, with Barnabas, but Barnabas wanted to bring his cousin. For whatever reason, Paul was like, I don't want your cousin to come. And Barnabas was like, no, my cousin's going to come. And they ended up splitting because of that. And Barnabas ended up going to Cyprus with his cousin. And then Paul went to the churches with Silas. So Barnabas, he kind of stood his ground. Maybe was a little bit stubborn, a little bit feisty, but nothing that we wouldn't consider to be normal. Next, we have Paul. Now, most of you guys are probably going to say he should go into the absolute saint category. But let's be real, guys. Paul himself probably wouldn't even want to be called a saint. He literally said himself that he was the least of the apostles and that he was the chief of sinners. So just out of respect of Paul's own rhetoric, I'm going to put him into good example. Next, we have Jezebel. This is going straight into the get thee behind me, Satan category. Like, if you were to think of a whole bunch of negative attributes about a person, whether it be a thief, a liar, a witch, whatever, you can probably associate those things with Jezebel. Like, Jezebel was not a good person. She died the way she did for a reason. Next, we have Joseph. This is going straight into the absolute saint category. Literally, he endured so much. Like, he was betrayed by his brothers. Potiphar's wife lied on him, and he was in prison for years. And he still remained faithful to God and ultimately was rewarded for his faithfulness by becoming second in command, right? So, absolute saint. Next, we have Thomas. This is also going into the normal category, because understand, Thomas essentially didn't believe that Jesus had risen from the dead unless he had proof, right? That was basically what his story was. Like, I want to see physical, tangible proof that Jesus Christ is alive. But understand, this is very, very normal, right? A lot of us, God tells us things, or people tell us that God told me this, but we want proof. It's very, very, very normal. So I'm not going to sit here and try to scrutinize Thomas for doubting when all of us doubt. Like, don't sit here and try to tell yourself that God told you something once and you didn't ask God for a sign. Like, be real with yourself. Next, we have Solomon. This is going into the good example category. And the only reason I'm not going to put him any lower is that, from what I recall, Solomon basically began to fall off into idolatry towards the end of his life. Like for the majority of his reign, he actually was walking with God. And also understand as well that when Solomon was king, he basically was in charge of Israel at its peak. Like Israel was united, Israel was at its wealthiest economically, and also was at its mightiest militarily when Solomon was in charge, right? Like he is the embodiment of a monarch in charge of a wealthy and powerful kingdom. He was very, very wise, right? Even when Jesus talked about Solomon, he referred to Solomon's splendor, right? Like, so most of Solomon's prestige and wisdom and might, it sort of outweighs the idolatry. But understand that what he did in terms of marrying foreign women, which is actually a pretty consistent theme throughout the Bible when it came to the Hebrew men, because for whatever reason, I don't really know why, like Hebrew men often fell into sin, not because of women necessarily, but because of foreign women, particularly women that didn't worship and follow God. It's sort of a little interesting actually if you think about it. But yeah, good example. Next we have Jesus Christ, the Lord, the Son of God himself, absolute saint. He's God himself. I mean, no one's above him. So, I mean, pretty self-explanatory. Next we have Naaman. If you don't know, this is going into the normal category. Naaman was a commander in the Syrian army who had leprosy. And essentially he found out because of his servant who told his wife that there was a man, Elisha, who could heal him. And essentially he wanted to be healed, but Elisha did not come to him directly. Instead, he sent a messenger to Naaman and said, wash in the river Jordan, I believe, 7 times, and then you'll be healed. And basically Naaman got really upset because he was like, I'm the commander, like you should come to me. And on top of that, you could be lying for all I know. Like, how do I know you're legit? And he basically operated out of pride and out of doubt. But eventually his servants convinced him to go wash in the Jordan River, because it's not as if there were like alligators waiting for him, because this was a pretty common river for people to wash in. He washed 7 times and he was healed. Not only was he healed, but his skin literally became like that of a child. It was completely renewed. And on top of that, he ended up becoming a fully converted believer in God. And so, again, him operating out of doubt and him sort of having this entitlement because he's a commander, very, very normal behavior. I'm sorry. Next, we have Ahab. This is going into the Loki. I'm going to put this in the Get Thee Behind Me scene. Some can make an argument for a bad example because some people might say that he was led astray because of Jezebel, but the reality is that Ahab was already a bad individual. The Bible does not imply that Ahab was this saint before he married Jezebel. He was already pretty bad. But the only reason why there might be some hesitation is that there is a story in 1 Kings where after Jezebel murdered Naboth for his vineyard, Elijah literally went to Ahab and was like, you're going to die, your kingdom's going to be separated, all these bad things are going to happen. And it literally says that Ahab fasted and literally tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and humbled himself. And because of that, God actually took notice and delayed the judgment. And so it's like, even though Ahab was pretty bad, it wasn't as if he was as bad as Jezebel, because nowhere in the Bible does it say that Jezebel prayed to God. She never humbled herself before God. Like, she was pretty much anti-God, almost anti-Christ. Whereas Ahab was pretty bad, but he was willing to humble himself when it came to a certain point. And so, yeah, but pretty bad overall. Next, we have Saint Mary. This is going straight into the absolute saint category. As we know, she was literally pre-selected for all the Calvinists out there. She was predestined to be the mother of God, absolute saint. Next, we have King David. This is going to go into the good example category, only because, as we know, like David's primary sin that most people know about is him committing adultery, right? Like, not only did he commit adultery, but he literally murdered her husband, right? It wasn't as if he like wanted to flaunt that he had taken this man's wife in front of him. Like, he literally manipulated him, murdered him, and then took his wife and tried to act as if nothing had happened. Like, it's pretty messed up, actually. And so because of that, I'm going to put it into good example, but understand that David is primarily known for being like, again, the root of Jesse, this king of Israel, you know, a man after God's own heart, you know, direct descendant, or not descendant, but direct ancestor of Jesus Christ. Like, the good outweighs the bad, which is, again, what this category represents. Next, we have the devil. This is going straight into the Get Thee Behind Me Satan category. Like, this is pretty self-explanatory. Next, we have Job. This is going into absolute saint. Now, some people might argue that he should go into good example because he began to, like, quote unquote, question God. But I don't really feel that way. I feel like he was just asking questions, right? Like the same way that Jesus was like, why have you forsaken me? Like, he was just verbally expressing himself while he was suffering. Like, I feel like that doesn't make him a bad person. So overall, absolute saint. He was so righteous that the devil had to literally ask God permission to attack Job. So that's pretty, like, you just think about that. Like, imagine being so righteous that the devil has to ask God to do bad things to you. Next, we have Delilah. This is going straight into Get Thee Behind Me, Satan. And again, it kind of goes back to this theme of Hebrew men not being led astray by Hebrew women, but being led astray by foreign women, right? Understand, for all the boys watching, like, Delilah did not love Samson, guys. Samson loved Delilah. This is why you can never have these one-sided relationships where you're pouring into the other person while they're not pouring into you. Because understand, Delilah sold out for money. She's sort of similar to Judas, actually. Like, the Philistines came to her and were like, if you tell us the secret to Samson's strength, we're going to give you money. And she was pretty much almost like a gold digger and was willing to literally betray her so-called lover for some money. So just keep that in mind. Next, we have Ananias and Sapphira. This is going into the low-key, get thee behind me, or bad example. I'm going to put it into get thee behind me for now. If you don't know, essentially Ananias and Sapphira had some land. They sold the land and then went to the apostles, I think also St. Peter, and were like, here's all the money that we made from selling this land. But they didn't tell Peter that they had kept some of the profits for themselves. They instead lied and wanted Peter to think that they had given all of the money. And Peter immediately discerned that they were lying, and they literally died on the spot. And the reason why this is so bad is that this is like a very early example of self-righteousness and wanting people to think that you're good instead of actually being good. Like, they were more concerned with being perceived as righteous instead of actually being righteous. And that's just such a bad example to set for other people. Because a lot of people do that, right? Like, they'll go into church and they'll maybe dress modestly when they're actually a prostitute, but they want you to think that they're good, right? It's deception. It's literally trickery. So that's why I put it into the get thee behind me Satan. And obviously what they did was bad enough because they literally died for it. Next, we have Haman. This is also going into the get thee behind me Satan category. If you don't know, Haman was a man who was alive during the Persian Empire. This was also when Esther was alive, and he essentially was trying to annihilate Esther and her people. And he was also ultimately trying to almost like rise in the ranks militarily and politically, because he was trying to like get as close as he could to the king so that he could basically gain more power for himself. Very manipulative, very power hungry, and ultimately had a very murderous mentality. Next, we have Herod. This is also going into the get thee behind me Satan category. There are actually two Herods I can think of. There's Herod that tried to murder Jesus when he was a baby, and there's also the other Herod who was alive when Paul was alive, and he was basically so proud that people began to call him God, and then God immediately struck him down, like killed him. And so whether it be pride or murder, pretty bad either way. Get thee behind me, Satan. Next, we have Eli. This is going into the bad example, guys. The thing you have to understand when it comes to Eli is that Eli was a high priest. And some of you guys might say, okay, what does that mean? Understand that this was before Israel had kings. There was a priest and there were judges, but understand that the priests were always above the judges. Like, the priests had the final say. And understand that in order to be a priest, you not only had to come from the tribe of Levi, but you had to be a direct descendant of Aaron, who was Moses' brother. It wasn't enough to just be a Levi. You had to come from a specific bloodline of Aaron. And also understand that at this time, Eli was the high priest, meaning that there was no other priest that was above Eli. So you can kind of understand the importance that he was, or the importance of his position in Israel. And he still, for whatever reason, was not able to keep his boys in check. His two sons were known for sleeping around and desecrating the different sacrifices that the Israelites would bring to offer to God for repentance. Like, they were that bad. These were priests. They come from a very specific and exclusive bloodline, and were still out here just completely desecrating and disrespecting their office. And something else I also want to talk about as well is that part of why God judged Eli is that Eli had a responsibility to make sure that his house was following God. And it's almost similar to Adam, right? Like, a lot of people don't talk about the fact that when Eve ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Adam was right there, guys. It literally says that Eve turned to Adam. Adam could have stopped her. And the reason why he should have stopped her is that, understand that Eve was made from Adam. Eve was made for Adam. Adam was literally supposed to be in charge of Eve. Like, literally, it literally says that Adam was going to rule over Eve. Eve literally should have been stopped by Adam, because Adam had a responsibility to keep Eve in check, and he didn't. He literally just let her sin. And so it's sort of a similar mentality when it comes to Eli. Like, he is a father, he has children, he's supposed to keep his children in check. He's not supposed to just sit there and allow his children to do all types of evil things. And because of that irresponsibility, that is why Eli died the way he did. In fact, both of his sons died. And so this, I think even in the book of Acts, there's actually a stipulation where it says that if a person wants to be a bishop, their family, meaning their wife and kids, have to be good. You cannot be a bishop while your wife is doing all these deplorable things and while your children are out here running out doing crazy things. Like, you as a man, whether you're a father or a husband, you need to keep your family in order. So that's really the main takeaway of why Eli is a bad example. Next, we have Daniel. This is going straight into the absolute saint. Literally, guys, he refused to bow down to the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. He was willing to die. He was thrown into the lion's den and was still miraculously saved. It doesn't get any better than that. Next, we have Cain. Pretty self-explanatory. The first murderer was literally cursed by God. get thee behind me, Satan. Next, we have Martha. Martha's going into the normal category. If you don't know, Martha was the brother of Lazarus. Lazarus was a man that was miraculously raised from the dead. The only thing with Martha, though, is that here's a story where her sister, Mary, not the mother of God, Mary, but a different Mary, was washing the feet of Jesus. And essentially, she got upset because Martha was in the kitchen doing all the work. And she was literally like, I need help. How come she isn't helping me? And of course, Jesus later told her, like, I'm only going to be here for like 3 years, my ministry at least. And you'll have all the time in the world to like complain or whatever, but like you should honor the fact that she's honoring me. And also, there's another part where like Jesus had been told that Lazarus was dying, and he basically waited until after Lazarus had died to come visit the family. And Martha was kind of upset about that. She was like, he's already dead. Like, you should have came sooner, operating from a place of doubt. And so again, but understand these are all very normal things. If you've ever been cooking in the kitchen by yourself for a large group of people, it's pretty understandable to be upset. Or if you have someone really close to you that's dying, and let's say the paramedics come after they die, like it's a pretty reasonable response to be like, you should have came earlier. So I'm not going to judge her too much, or judge her at all for that matter. Even though this video low-key is me judging people. Anyways, next we have Saul. This is going into the bad example category, right? I'm not going to put him to get thee behind me, Satan, but understand that he was pretty bad. Like, he not only defied God multiple times, which is why he lost his authority and lost his anointing, but also understand as well that he literally was trying to murder David. And on top of that, he resorted to like sorcery and witchcraft at some point in his life. And so overall, a bad example. Next, we have Gideon. This is also going low-key. I don't know if I should put this in a good example or bad example. I'm going to put it in a good example. He was a judge. There was an army trying to attack Israel, and God used only 300 men and Gideon to defeat the entire army. But unfortunately, Gideon, for whatever reason, wasn't a very strong spiritual leader, and he actually ended up leading the children of Israel into idolatry, which is low-key why he's not like an absolute saint. And low-key should go into bad example, but I'm going to leave it here for now. And also understand that he was the father of the next person, which is Abimelech. Abimelech goes into the get thee behind me, Satan category because he was a murderer. Abimelech had 70 brothers because Gideon had a lot of wives, and he murdered all of them because he wanted to be king. And on top of that, Gideon never specifically said that Abimelech was going to be king. Abimelech just operated out of greed. And on top of that, Abimelech only ended up being king for 3 years, and he was later murdered. So he just spilled all this blood out of his own selfish greed, which is just deplorable. And lastly, but not least, we have Enoch going up into the absolute saint category. He was the first man to never officially die. Like, God just took him into heaven. He walked with God for 365 years, and then God just took him.